Hello, guys. This is Mr. Cole. Today we're going over um, what is called fiscal policy, something super important. One of the next 2 weeks are some of the really most important stuff that we've covered all year because it is so relevant, especially to the current crisis that we are in and any crisis that our countries face economically. Um, this is how we've solved them. So with that, really need you to focus. It's going to be, I've decided to kind of trim it down to really be scenario based. So a lot of supply and demand graphs, since you guys are generally pretty good at that, is kind of going to be more of our focus. But you definitely very important that you pick up on some stuff here as we go over it. Okay. So chapter 15, using fiscal policy. We got it today. The goal is to basically find out what fiscal policy is. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll get into actually, how we use it. Okay. So when I use the term fiscal policy, okay, the word fiscal means anything related to government taxing and government spending. Okay. So the word fiscal, anything with government spending. Like, for example, even here at Tiffin City Schools, we have a fiscal year, and we have to get our spending in by a certain fiscal year and account for all that. So it's not as easy like when our school district wants to buy laptops. It's not always just easy as going up and just going and buying laptops, right? They have a certain process they have to follow because we have a specific fiscal budget for each fiscal year, right? Now, what we're going to focus on, though, is what we call fiscal policy. And this is the federal government's way of using their taxes and using the government spending programs to try to affect the economy. So last week you looked at all of the various programs that we have. All of those programs are a part of our nation's fiscal policy. In some way, every single one of those affects the economy because it's government spending. And every tax dollar that there is that the government receives or raises is part of fiscal policy because they're taking money from us and providing services for us. Okay, but it's all about trying to affect the economy. Now, traditionally, when we think of fiscal policy, we think of what's called discretionary fiscal policy, and that's what we're actually going to focus on the most, is the actual choices that the government makes to try to correct something that's wrong in the economy. Okay, and we're going to get into those more in a second, so I'm going to wait on that. However, there are some programs that are built in that just automatically do this. And those are a lot of those mandatory spending programs that we looked at last week. Things like food stamps, things like Social Security, things like Medicare, even our tax system. These are all things that it's not like every single Congress is choosing every single time to do those. They're just automatic and they stabilize the economy. If you lose your job, there are stabilizing food stamps, unemployment insurance, things like that that are automatically built in, okay? But really what I want to focus on is the discretionary policy because this is kind of really the famous area of economic fiscal policy. So when we're looking at fiscal policy can be classified into two different ways: expansionary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy. Now, the names are not pretty much give it away. During expansionary policy, the government is trying to increase economic output. They're trying to grow the economy. During times of contractionary fiscal policy, they're trying to decrease economic output. Now, when I say government, what I mean is really two big main actors. I am talking Congress and the president. We know that in our constitutional system, the president has to cannot pass laws on their own. They need Congress to pass that. So I'm just going to say the word government, but government specifically here is Congress and the president. Okay? So let's start with expansionary policy. The goal of expansionary policy is to increase economic output, which in turn would reduce unemployment. As more output's happening, more people get hired. As more people get hired, more people spend money. As more people spend money, more people get hired, and so forth. It creates a nice upward spiral for us. Okay? To accomplish this, Congress and the president would have to increase their spending or decrease their taxes or do both. Right? So, for example, if, let's say, Congress decides to build a bridge. They spend $50 million building a bridge. Well, those $50 million are going to go to companies who make the steel. That's going to hire more workers. The workers to actually build the bridge, all the equipment needed to build the bridge. It's growing the economy as they're doing this. Okay, or it could be as simple as what we're currently experiencing right now with the Trump budget, right? With the $1,200 check, right? Every American is going to get a $1,200 check. Well, sorry, kids, you're not. But every taxpaying American is going to get $1,200 check in the mail, right? The government hopes that you use that money to go and buy other things and keep the economy expanding. Okay. The other move they can do is decrease taxes. As you decrease taxes, people have more money. Now, we're going to work under the assumption here that when people have more money, what do they do with it? They spend it. Okay. That's not always the case. We know Mr. Cole is probably going to put his $1,200 check away. But in the theory of it, as more Americans get more money, they spend that money. So the goal of expansionary policy is to get more money in people's hands, to get more economic output going by the use of the government. Now, there are times where Congress and the president should actually be decreasing economic output. This is during times of inflation. Okay? During times of inflation, the government should be cutting back on their spending. It should be increasing taxes as a way to try to slow the economy down. Sometimes the economy gets too hot. People are spending too much money on things, and prices are skyrocketing. So the idea is you tax them more. When you tax them more, now Americans have less money to spend, which because they have less money to spend, they're not going to buy as much, which would drive prices down. Okay? To show you kind of where all this makes sense at, we're going to go back to our aggregate supply and demand charts here. So let's look at expansionary policy here, okay? So Congress decides we'll look at the Trump check of $1,200. The idea is government's going to spend $2 trillion to get $1,200 in every American's hand, okay? Now, because more Americans are getting more income, we know that would shift the demand curve to the right, which would cause a rise in output. Remember, our output measurement is GDP, right? GDP would go up. The economy would be expanding. But with that, kind of the negative effect of that is that our prices are going to go up with it. Okay? So the hard part is that what Trump's check is going to do is it's going to grow economic output, but it's going to lead to a raise in prices because that supply is staying the exact same. Okay. Now the other side I told you. Oh, I guess I can't do that with this. Hold on. Delete. Now the other side of this, what I was saying, is that sometimes the government actually tries to slow the economy down. Let's say things aren't, the economy is too hot. We're in 2005 right now. 2006, 2007, the economy is awesome. People are buying things. It's great. It's awesome, right? Well, as that happens, as people buy more money, as demand is expanding, we know that prices tend to go up, right? Just as I showed you, as demand goes up, prices go up. So sometimes the government actually has to slow this thing down. And to slow this thing down, they actually raise taxes. When they raise taxes and they cut their spending, what they end up doing is actually, as I mess this up, sorry. All right, what they actually end up doing is raising taxes, which drives the demand curve to the left. When the demand curve goes to the left, you end up seeing prices go down. Inflation has fallen. The problem is when you raise taxes on people, it causes your economic output, your GDP, to go down, meaning some people are going to lose their jobs. Right? Now, this is ultimately the really hard part with fiscal policy, and where we'll finish up here, is the fact that it's not a really good campaign strategy to go and run as president saying, I'm going to intentionally put the government into recession. That usually does not get you elected very well, right? And usually raising taxes on Americans ends up getting you voted out of office. You can ask George H.W. Bush, famously ran on the campaign, no more taxes. But when faced with an economic boom and high inflation, he raised taxes and he got voted out, right? So with this, it's pretty hard for fiscal policy to work effectively because president and Congress are elected by the people. And people aren't always real thrilled with them losing their jobs because taxes got raised, okay? The other problem is that these policies take a while to go into effect. It's not like this is something that's overnight can fix a recession, right? I mean, not like all of a sudden Trump's $1,200 check comes and everybody's happy again, right? These programs take a long time to start getting the economy rolling again. And you'll see that we have faster ways of doing it than fiscal policy, and that's one of the downsides of it. So that's a quick little recap of some basis for fiscal policy. Tomorrow we'll start looking at the actual true ways it's accomplished, which we'll get into the next one. All right, thanks, guys.